The Blue Jewel.
Chapter 8. Part 4. Ferdinand de Bizzi was hurrying through the magnificent building, which was the headquarters of the Council of the Magic Orders of the city of Tripulia, commonly known as the Council of Magi. It was the body that governed Tripulia and all the mags of the world. Belonging to the council was already an honor, only the Grand Masters of each order of magic in the city, who now numbered 15, were worthy. The most important order was that of the White Robes, founder of today's Tripulia, but theirs, the Order of the Magi of Light, also had its influence. Ferdinand was its Grand Master, an honor, and also the one who presided over the Great Council. As head of Tripulia he had to face multiple challenges. In his opinion, the number of Magins did not stop growing, and the rumors of necromancy within Tripulia itself were already too many to deny the problem that officially did not exist. But most of the council thought otherwise. The Magins gave too much gold in taxes to restrict their number, and necromancy was just plain gossip. It was an honor to be the president of the council, but the power was very limited. Not like in their order where the number of Magins was controlled and they served the same order, necromancy was totally controlled, but that discipline was impossible to apply to the rest of Tripulia. The reason, the White Robes, the influence of Fedorus Magnus, his Grand Master over the other orders, was such that in reality the one who ruled Tripulia was Fedorus. The Tunics did not admit Magins. If a student abandoned his studies within his order he could not exercise magic, but he did admit that the others had Magins, since in their superiority they considered the rest of the orders as practitioners of an inferior magic. The necromancy thing, not to mention the subject until 3 months ago. The fact of depending on the will of the White Robes was a circumstance that displeased Ferdinand, who wanted to introduce changes within Tripulia. But this situation would not last long. Fedorus was already over 100 years old, some ill-intentioned rumors pointed to dark practices to extend his life, and his health was fragile. Lately he did not attend the meetings of the council, his death was near. Without his influence, Ferdinand would have his hands free to carry out the reforms that Tripulia needed. The most powerful wizard after Fedorus was him, without a doubt. But there was also another problem. The mercenaries who had recovered the magic object and were recommended by Fedorus himself now refused to hand it over. Their conditions were simple. They wanted to know the reason why a white-robed mage and a black magin were involved when at first no one had told them about such a sinister conspiracy. If the explanation was not to their liking, they would keep the object. The truth is that the first surprised was Ferdinand himself. The exchange ended with 3 dead. An unknown young man who was the one who had the object, the white robe and the Magin. He made inquiries about the young man and had indeed applied for admission to all the orders of magic, including his own, but all of them had rejected him except one, which he abandoned after 2 months. Now, he had a letter of recommendation from an old acquaintance of his loaf. They were friends during their time as apprentices both within the Order of Eternal Light. But Loaf did something unusual. He left his order to enter the White Robes, something very strange, and something even stranger. For more than 20 years there had been no news of him. Loaf was an incredibly talented mage. He could be a Grand Master without problems, but he disappeared, and now a pupil of his appears out of nowhere with the object and ends up dead. Ferdinand didn't know what to answer. It's all too strange. Only the White Robes knew the truth. This matter came to the attention of the council due to a confession of Fedorus himself. Inside the White Robes there was a section of magicians who were looking for magical objects to use in black magic. Quite a scandal. Even if the news reached Albioners' ears, they could have many problems. What was that white robe doing? Why is this object so important? How far does corruption go within the most important order of Tripulia? What is its objective? It was something that Ferdinand couldn't answer to the mercenaries, and that's why he was so nervous. His strategy was a simple meeting. There was a signed contract and it had to be fulfilled, although in principle he had told them that those who would carry out the exchange were mercenaries from 3 to a quarter. That did not affect what was signed. Their complaints would reach Almera if necessary. The object belonged to the council. The end. He arrived at the council's audience room, a beautiful circular room with 15 chairs that made a semicircle. In the central position his seat was a little higher than the rest. When he arrived he noticed that an old magician was sitting next to him. It was Fedoros, a notable surprise. This matter must be very important. He greeted him with a bow that Fedoros responded with a smile. The other members of the council arrived. At the request of Fedoros, only the members of the council remained in the room and the mercenaries entered. The subject to be discussed was confidential. There were the mercenaries before them. Ferdinand had reports of all of them. The company of the Blue Phoenix, one of the most solvent in Almera. It was fortunate that they were so close when they wanted to hire his services. The group is made up of Aris the Black General with his cousins, Kush a wizard of the unknown Thissy but quite remarkable and with all the permits in order, Krytus an exiled dwarf of the Brown Hills, a huge Dinka who had a hard time entering the room because of his fearsome 3 meters, another half-orc with vague reports and Gosberg. There were so many rumors about this little Denka that he didn't know what to think. Unlike in their first meeting, they were accompanied by a Kendali, something extraordinary, and a young woman quite impressed to be in front of such distinguished sorcerers. From what he had been informed, the young woman was the sister of Loaf's late student. Ferdinand had instinct and something told him that this girl had something special. Finally, the chairman of the board received one last note from his apprentice, which he read just before the door closed. The note was brief: news about the last half-orc, named Agnorak, who caused the death of the king of the vampires 8 years ago. It was certainly something impressive. The doors to the hall were closed. All the magicians, apprentices, and secretaries stayed outside. Now they were alone. For a moment they studied each other. Ferdinand, as he was accustomed to starting conversations, so he took the floor. Your mission was not as discreet as all of us would like. At least you have the object in your possession, do you? Aris as captain advanced towards the mags. Yes. The magicians smiled. Was what they expected to hear. The price paid for their services was certainly not cheap. Give it to us now. Aris smiled but didn't answer. Another mercenary went ahead of the group. It was Gosberg and stood next to Aris, who took a step back. It was clear who was in charge. We are not sure that we are going to comply with the conditions of our contract. The Magi did not like these words and began to murmur among themselves. Ferdinand had to restrain himself. He had enough problems since he also had to endure the requests of proud mercenaries. Mortals, how dare you before us mighty mags refuse to fulfill your contract? Fedoros had risen. The old man looked 50 years younger, his eyes bloodshot, and he leaned against a staff of white ivory. Everyone in the room was impressed except for a small Denka who approached the powerful magician and lit a cigarette. Almost everyone in this room is mortal. Fedoros smiled and sat down again. You will not get out of here alive. Gosberg took a long drag. Neither do you. To their surprise, the Denka and the magician began to laugh in a knowing way. Gosberg extinguished the cigarette with his boot. It would be a solution detrimental to the interests of all. Fedoros stopped smiling. I understand. I agree to answer all your questions in exchange for the object. The rest of the mags were amazed. They had never seen the great Fedoros Magnus retreat from anyone. He always dominated with an iron fist, but to Gosberg he had yielded. The president of the council was resigned to being a real troupe, and the rest of the magicians were too absorbed in the conversation since Fedoros was thinking of saying information that was not found in any book. Kush stepped forward to the height of Gosberg, bowed to Fedoros as the great magician that he was. The old man accepted it by quickly closing his eyes. Reverend masters of the council, I think it is necessary to expose some questions. What is the reason for us to be linked to such a strange case? In Tripulia, there is a group of mags who have murdered innocents for a dark purpose. Isn't that true? All the magicians nodded their heads. Now, a friend of ours who comes from the continent of Tagir came in search of her brother who died in the exchange. The object in question is a small jewel, and his brother's assassins are a mage member of the Order of the Grand Fedoros and a black magin who is dedicated to necromancy. The magician went north in search of the jewel, which implies a degree of corruption within the order of the white robes of great importance. Kush spoke with great authority. He looked like another Grand Master. It came as a surprise to the council, who despised all the mags in the south. We want to know what the hell is going on in this city. Gosberg demanded again. Kush again took the floor. Arian's brother studied in a magic order and the council was never aware of it, nor were we informed of who he was. We found out thanks to his sister. 2 magicians travel north and the council does not know this fact. They forced the king of Tame to look for our friend, a fact that the teachers surely do not know. The black Magins roam freely at night murdering innocents within the walls of this city. It's time to tell the truth. Ferdinand had a surprised expression. It was true. It was all true. Tripulia was a nest of corrupt wizards and full of murderers who would sell corpses in exchange for a few gold coins. Ferdinand spoke not to answer these questions, but to regain the prominence lost throughout the meeting. It was time to show who was the president of the Council of Magi to all those present including Fedoris. Your questions are all reasonable, magician. But I regret that I cannot answer most of them because the same questions that you are asking us are available to all the members of this council and there is only one person in this room who can answer them. Ferdinand looked at Fedoris and the whole room listened to the Grand Master of the White Robes, who seemed to be amused by the whole situation. It seemed that this great quarrel had rejuvenated him.